One envelope changed everything. It arrived taped to my front door, stamped with the cold authority of the HOA, and inside was a fine accusing me of violating rules I never agreed to follow. They demanded payment, compliance, and silence. What they didn't know was that this single threat would unravel a lie buried for decades and expose a secret powerful people desperately wanted hidden. Stay with me, because the ending flips everything you think you know about ownership, power, and justice. I bought my land for peace, a quiet stretch of property bordered by trees, old survey markers, and a gravel road that barely anyone used. For years it stayed calm. Then the neighborhood expanded. Identical houses rose behind my fence. Streets appeared overnight. And suddenly strangers acted like they owned the horizon. I kept to myself until the day a woman in an HOA jacket knocked, smiled tightly, and told me my fence violated community standards. I laughed. I didn't live in their community. She didn't laugh back. A week later, the fine arrived. More letters followed, each sharper than the last, threatening liens, legal action, and daily penalties. Friends told me to just pay it. It was easier, they said, but something felt wrong. The HOA documents referenced boundaries that didn't match my deed. Streets named in their letters didn't exist when my property was recorded, so I started digging. Old county maps, dusty filing cabinets, microfilm scans from the 70s. Every document pointed to the same unsettling truth. My land existed long before the HOA, long before the developer, long before the cheerful signs welcoming residents to a planned community. The deeper I went, the more resistance I met. Clerks grew nervous. Calls went unanswered. Then a retired surveyor agreed to meet me quietly. He laid out yellowed maps on a diner table and traced a line with his finger. They built over this, he said. All of it. That was the moment I realized the HOA didn't just find the wrong person. They picked a fight with the actual owner of the ground beneath their perfect neighborhood. I knew the fine was leverage, not law, and fear was their favorite tool. They assumed I would fold, apologize, and disappear. Instead, I documented everything, saved every message, and prepared for a confrontation that would test patience, money, and nerve. The neighborhood looked perfect on the surface, but perfection often hides rot underneath. I didn't know how far this would go yet. Only that turning back now would mean surrendering something far bigger than cash. That realization settled in slowly, heavy and unavoidable. As the stakes sharpened with every unanswered call, and silence grew louder by the hour. The HOA didn't wait for me to respond. They escalated. Bright orange notices appeared on my fence, warning neighbors that I was out of compliance. Strangers slowed their cars to stare, some shaking their heads like I was the problem. Then came the certified letter scheduling a hearing. Mandatory attendance. Fines accruing daily. Their confidence was almost impressive. I showed up alone. The HOA board sat behind a long table. Polished wood, printed bylaws, rehearsed authority. Karen was there too, arms crossed, already smiling like the verdict was decided. They spoke in formal tones, citing rules, sections, and penalties. When I said I wasn't part of the HOA, the room chuckled. That laughter didn't last. I placed my deed on the table, then the original survey. Then the county assessor's letter confirming my parcel boundaries. One board member leaned forward, confused. Another whispered. Karen's smile twitched. I explained calmly that my land predated the development and that their fence rules did not apply to property they did not own. They dismissed it as a misunderstanding. Claimed their developer had transferred everything legally. Claimed records change. Claimed I was mistaken. So I asked a simple question. If they owned my land, why did I still pay taxes on it? Silence answered first, then irritation. A week later, contractors arrived. They tried to measure my property without permission. I stopped them and called the sheriff. The deputy checked the documents and told them to leave. That should have ended it. Instead, the HOA filed a complaint in civil court, accusing me of encroachment onto their community land. That filing forced transparency. During discovery, the developer's documents surfaced. Missing signatures, altered maps, a boundary adjustment never approved by the county. It became clear someone had pushed paperwork through, assuming no one would challenge it decades later. The HOA had inherited a ticking bomb. Residents started asking questions. Online forums lit up. Homeowners wondered why surveyors were suddenly walking yards and repainting lines. Property values wobbled. The board tried damage control, sending emails insisting everything was fine. It wasn't. Karen confronted me one evening, furious, accusing me of threatening her home. I told her the truth. I never wanted their houses. I wanted acknowledgement. The law didn't care about intentions, only facts. And the facts were closing in fast. By the time the court date arrived, the HOA's confidence had cracked. They realized this wasn't about a fence anymore. It was about land, liability, and a mistake that could swallow an entire neighborhood. What followed would expose hidden deals, panic meetings, and a legal reckoning no board vote could undo, setting the stage for a courtroom moment that would leave everyone involved stunned. The courtroom felt smaller than expected, heavy with whispers and nervous energy. Homeowners filled the benches behind the HOA board, their faces tight with confusion and fear. They weren't here out of loyalty. They were here because their homes, their savings, and their futures suddenly felt uncertain. Karen sat in the front row, tapping her foot, still convinced confidence could bend reality. The judge wasted no time. He reviewed the filings, frowned at the inconsistencies, and asked the HOA's attorney to explain the boundary discrepancy. The explanation unraveled mid-sentence. Maps didn't align. Dates overlapped incorrectly. Signature stamp appeared on documents from years after the supposed signer had died. Each revelation landed like a hammer. My attorney presented the surveyor's testimony next. Calm, precise, impossible to ignore. He explained how the original parcel lines were shifted during development. Not by accident, but by convenience. Streets, lawns, and even a playground had been placed on land never legally transferred. The room murmured as the weight of that truth settled in. Then came the developer's former project manager, subpoenaed and cornered. Under oath, he admitted pressure to smooth out boundary issues to keep construction moving. He assumed no one would notice. He assumed wrong. The judge leaned back, eyes narrowing, and asked if the HOA was aware of this history. The attorney hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Karen finally stood, interrupting the proceedings, insisting this was unfair, that families would suffer. The judge cut her off sharply. Fairness, he said, begins with lawful ownership. Her face drained of color. When the ruling came, it felt unreal. The court dismissed the HOA's complaint, voided the fines, and recognized my deed as valid and enforceable. More than that, it ordered a full review of the community's land titles. The implication was devastating. Portions of the neighborhood were built on my property. Gasps echoed. Some residents cried. Others stared straight ahead, doing silent math. The HOA board looked defeated, no longer powerful, just exposed. The judge made it clear this wasn't the end, only the beginning of untangling a massive legal error. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Microphones appeared. I said little. This wasn't about winning. It was about truth surfacing after years underground. Karen avoided the cameras entirely. That night, emails poured in from homeowners. Some angry, some apologetic, some terrified. They wanted answers I didn't yet have. I only knew one thing for certain. The fine that started this was gone. But the consequences were just beginning, and the next chapter would decide what justice actually looked like. The weeks after the ruling were chaos wrapped in silence. Survey crews returned, this time officially, repainting lines that no one wanted to see. Lawns were split by bright markers. Fences suddenly meant nothing. The HOA stopped sending emails altogether, as if quiet could undo what was already public record. But reality doesn't rewind. Lawyers descended on the neighborhood. Some homeowners hired their own. Others joined a class action against the developer and the HOA board. Meetings were held behind closed doors, then leaked anyway. Insurance companies asked hard questions. Banks paused refinancing. What once looked like a perfect community now felt fragile, balanced on paperwork that never should have existed. The HOA tried to approach me with a settlement. They offered money, access easements, even a public apology, as long as I would sign over the disputed land quietly. I listened. Then I declined. Not out of spite, but because selling wouldn't fix the damage already done. People deserved clarity, not another cover-up. Eventually, the county stepped in. An independent review confirmed what the court had already implied. The developer had knowingly built beyond approved boundaries. The HOA had enforced rules on land it didn't own. Fines, liens, and threats issued over the years were suddenly questioned. Some ruled invalid entirely. Karen moved away before the final report was released. No announcement, just a for sale sign that appeared one morning and disappeared weeks later. The board dissolved soon after, replaced by a temporary administrator tasked with damage control rather than governance. As for me, I finally got what I wanted from the beginning. Recognition, my property lines restored, legal costs covered, and the right to decide what happened to my land. I didn't fence it higher or shut people out. I worked with the county to grant proper easements, ensuring families wouldn't lose access to their homes while the legal mess was resolved. Some neighbors apologized in person. Others never spoke to me again. Both reactions were understandable. When foundations crack, trust does too. Looking back, the fine feels almost absurd. A small piece of paper that triggered a collapse of assumptions. Power only works when no one questions it. The moment someone does, it has to prove itself. In this case, it couldn't. If there's one lesson here, it's this. Documents matter. History matters. And intimidation only works on people who believe they have no ground to stand on. Sometimes you literally own the ground beneath everyone else's feet, and you don't even know it yet. What started as an HOA trying to control, a fence ended with an entire community, forced to face the truth. Justice didn't arrive loudly. It arrived slowly, methodically, and permanently, leaving behind a reminder that even the most organized authority can crumble when built on land that was never theirs. If you love this crazy story, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any wild HOA battles. Smash that like to show your support, and drop a comment below telling us what you would do if you were facing a Karen like this. You never know. Your story might be featured next.